but we want to make Mondays a day to, elevate, and a day to, refocus on your goals, a day to remotivate yourself for the week to come, because Monday means it's a new week, baby, and it's time to crush those
Yeah.
goals.
You gotta start it off right, and you know that Monday is the start of the week, start of the goals, right? But it's also that idea that we talked about the last week that positivity is a choice, and Mondays is just a day that we let beat us down instead of choosing to say no, there's something better than this. We can be positive throughout all the rough that's happening.
100%, man. 100%. That is an excellent point. Uh, yeah, because your um thoughts and your ideas influence your attitude, right? I mean, if you are always thinking in a pessimistic manner, your outlook is going to be more pessimistic than if you're an optimistic person and you're always trying to look on the bright side of things and find the good in the situation. It's going to be easier. The more you do it, the easier it gets for you to do that and to keep that positive mental outlook. Not always easy. Definitely easy. Much easier said than done. But it is important. So
Yeah.
to start this off, I guess, Sly, what does self-awareness mean to you?
Self awareness is I think, one of the harder things to hit on because it is such a almost like this isn't the right word, but it's the word it's almost like an ethereal concept, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
like, well, self awareness is just being aware of myself. Yeah, well, that's a great definition, except for at the same time, we can't use the definition. We can't use the word in the definition, right?
Yeah, right.
So we have to come up with something uh, deeper. And we're talking about the emotional intelligence. So for me, self awareness really ties into that emotional intelligence side of, uh, you know, it's the understanding of how I react to things and how I am taken, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I say something, it's taken one way. Perspective is reality for so many people.
Yes.
I can say something not mean it one way towards you, but the way you take it is reality for you. So
100%.
self awareness is understanding that, you know, um, for me, I coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I coach kids anywhere from 5 years old, sometimes four. We have let 4 year olds into our program, anywhere from 4 or 5 to 18,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now I have to understand that I'm a big man, right? So the way I interact with those 4 and 5 year olds has to be different than the way I interact with Malnoxx, and has to be different than the way Malnoxx would interact with those 4 and 5 year olds. Malnoxx may be able to do something, and those 4 and 5 year olds think it's happy go lucky playtime. And I do the exact same thing. And because I am a bigger person,
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit more intimidating and scary.
Mm-hmm.
So self awareness is understanding those things. How are people going to react to what I'm doing? How am I going to react to what's happening around me? And just taking that introspective look.
100%. And I think, part of kind of what you just said is important to understand that when we're talking about self-awareness, we can really break it down almost into two categories, right? We have emotional self-awareness
Mhm.
and we have physical self-awareness. Both of those things are very important to talk about and to understand, and they work together because they all are a part of the larger whole of self-awareness. But there are kind of those two sides to self-awareness, whereas physical self-awareness is typically, not always, but it's typically something that's a little bit easier for people to comprehend and to execute on, because if I put my hand on a stove, I know it is hot. That's physical awareness. I'm aware that this is hot. I am aware that my arm hurts if I get punched. I am aware that if I fall down and skin my knee outside, that hurts. I know when I'm cold. I know when I'm too warm. Um, those kind of things. Being aware of your own body. But for some people, it's not so easy because you've been to a store and people just stand there in the middle of the aisle staring up at the ceiling, and you're trying to get around them. You're like, "Excuse me." They don't have any awareness of where they are in relation to other people. But then we also have the emotional self-awareness side, and I think the emotional self-awareness side is a lot harder for a lot of people to grasp and for a lot of people to understand, in that it's harder for someone to be aware. Sometimes it's just hard for people to be aware of their emotions and to know actually what they're feeling. If I'm upset, am I feeling angry? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling hurt? Am I feeling afraid? Am I feeling anxious? It's some people, don't have the emotional self-awareness to pinpoint that. And then if they do have the emotional self-awareness to pinpoint that, some people don't have the emotional self-awareness to then ascertain what the root cause of that is, right? And that's why sometimes, people will lash out at other people around them when they're upset, when they're angry, because they don't know what's making them angry. So they take that anger out on someone else, as opposed to, taking the moment to reflect and to be aware of what is actually making you angry, actually making you upset, and then taking action to solve that part.
Yeah. So first question,
Mhm.
I think, is like, how do we gain self-awareness, right? Because like, really easy to talk about the concept of self-awareness
Mhm.
and harder to talk about the practicality of how do we become more self-aware.
100%. 100%. And I think that is, um, again, all these things that we're talking about are much easier said than done,
Yeah.
right? But I think that trying to make it a practice to, when you're feeling a certain way, taking a second and really thinking and reflecting on why you feel that way. I mean, you're not going to, obviously, there's going to be situations where you don't know. There's going to be situations where you're mad and you don't know why. But the more that you practice stopping and thinking about, what happened that made you feel that way, the easier it's going to be to come to that point quicker the next time. And it's not always what happened to make me feel this way, because sometimes someone could say something to me and that makes me mad. But maybe something else is going on in my life that's really what's making me mad. And what they said, I took it way harder than I should have. Something that's a much smaller scale
Yeah.
is I get hangry. I get hangry a lot.
He does, chat. He does.
If I'm
Go
hungry and
ahead.
someone says something, I can be real short with them. And I could say, well, you said that and that's what made me angry. No, I'm hungry and that's why I'm angry. And I need to have the self-awareness to, A, know that that's what happened. And B, if I snap at someone when I'm hungry, I got to apologize and be like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. I'm hungry. I, I apologize. I'm going to go get some food. I'm going to grab a Snickers. So having the ability um, to understand the root cause of the problem, and then also having the awareness to know that if you lashed out at someone that was undeserving of that, to know that you gotta apologize to them. Like you gotta make it right. You can't just go around snapping at people because you're hungry. That doesn't work. You're not 5. I mean, maybe you
Yeah.
are 5. If you are 5, get off YouTube. Go to YouTube Kids.
I mean, if you're on 5 and you're watching a podcast about emotional intelligence, more power to you.
I
Stay
guess
right
that's
here
true.
and learn how to be, learn as much as we can teach, if we can teach anything.
Hashtag
Um,
not a doctor.
hashtag not a doctor. If you're struggling with something and you need to talk to somebody, uh, there are trained professionals. We're just sharing our experiences in these things. But I think you said slow down, right? Slow down and look and figure out, why are you feeling these ways.
Mm-hmm.
Another important thing is, I think, keeping a journal, which I know as a man is like, keep a diary. What? No, no, keep a journal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one, it's very therapeutic to be able to write down especially if you're one of those people who doesn't share your emotions
Yep.
openly with others. It's very therapeutic to write down what you're feeling. But also, if you have a journal at the end of the month, you can look back at it and see if you notice trends.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm having bad days, I tend to do this more. When, things are going good, I tend to let things slide by easier. You know, you can notice those trends inside of you, and that helps with self awareness.
100%.
The other thing, I think, probably, um, probably the wisest thing I was ever told as a young man of like 18, 19, first started working um, in the the area that we talked about last week that I worked in,
Mm-hmm.
where I had to deal with you know thousands of people every week. The Probably the wisest piece of advice I've ever gotten is criticism requires no response. So the concept of, if Mal comes to me and says something, criticizes me,
Mm-hmm.
one, it doesn't mean he's angry at me. It doesn't mean he's mad at me. He could just be pointing out something that he's noticing, which part of self awareness is taking in what other people see as well.
Yep.
But criticism requires no response. So the concept of, look at who's criticizing you, right? Does Malnox have a reason to try to tear me down? No, like, he's my boy. He's probably trying to help me notice something.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what they're saying. Like, is it an accurate statement? Are they only seeing half truths? Are they only seeing, you know, are they giving you an accurate concept? And then look at why they're saying, and like, take those things in. That doesn't require me to snap back at Malnox. That doesn't require me to defend myself. I could look at it and go, Mal is wrong. He's not seeing the full truth. He's completely incorrect in his assumption of what he thinks he's. That doesn't require me to go back to Mal and be like, you were wrong, by the way. You said this shit about. It doesn't. I just let it go. But if you can come up with that concept, like, one, lives can be a lot more peaceful for you. Because guess what? You're going to get criticized a lot.
Yep.
But two, like, you open yourself up to learn things about yourself that you may have always looked at as people just being rude or mean, or if you actually stop and look at it, you may learn something about yourself that you would have never gotten to know.
Yeah. 100%. And I think also in that same vein, something that can help with self-awareness is, whether it's in your professional life, in your personal life, whatever, to seek out feedback from people. But you have to do it with the mindset of, like you said, it's not going to require a response. Don't go asking someone for feedback. Like, I'm not going to go up to Sly and be like, hey, Sly, like, I got this new thing for, stream going on. I'm working on this new scene. What do you think? And then Sly tells me something, and I'm like, well, no, that's wrong. Like, don't go asking for feedback with like a preconceived notion of what you want to hear, and don't go asking for feedback if you're only looking for someone to reinforce your own opinions, right?
Yeah.
Go looking for feedback if you want someone to tell you something from a different perspective. I want to learn from a different perspective. I want to go, ask someone to, hey, will you watch this like stream I'm doing? Will you watch this clip I made? Like, will you watch this video I made? What do you think? Because that's the only way that I'm going to get better, is because I might like it or not like it. But, I want to see what other people see, because other people see things that you don't. They interpret things differently than you do. If I ask for feedback at work, say, and so I'm a martial arts instructor, I'm a fitness instructor. I work for, basically the same age range all the way up through adults. But if I, ask for feedback about, like, hey, this situation happened, this is how I handled it, how would you have handled that situation? Or, like, do you think I handled that situation appropriately? To me, everything I said and did could have been 100% correct. To someone else, like, hey, you said this, and like, you probably didn't mean it like this, but this is how it came off. And then I'm going to be like, oh, well, okay, next time, like, I know to maybe be a little more careful about, what I said, or I know that, okay, now I could see how that could come off the wrong way. Like, that's not what I meant, but I don't
Yeah.
always have the full perspective on it. And so when you get that kind of feedback over and over again, and when you're taking that feedback in and you internalize that, don't just let it go in one ear and out the other because you're like, no, that's not what I meant. That's wrong. When you
Yep.
internalize that and you think about it, you reflect on it, it's going to make you more effective as a communicator and more effective in your role, because whatever your role is, professional, personal life, is going to make you just a more effective and a more thoughtful person.
Yeah, I agree.
And also back on the train of thoughtfulness, I think another great thing to work on your self awareness is to meditate. And because, like I said, we said be quiet, be calm, take a second, and through meditation, that's what you're doing. And there's this great YouTube video about meditation, and I can't remember exactly what it's called now. If you're watching this later, I'll link it down in the description, or maybe I'll put a card up like right here or something. I don't know. It's somewhere, but it's this great video, and it's this guy who's talking about meditation, and he's saying that people think that meditation is you just have to sit there and you have to close your eyes, don't think about anything. That's not what it is. Like, that's not what meditation's about. That's not what meditation is supposed to be. Meditation is about giving your he calls it your monkey brain, to give your monkey brain something to do, because your monkey brain is the thing that's always going like here, it's and that's what gets distracted. And so he says, you focus on your breathing and breathe out, then you breathe out. And if you focus on your breathing, you focus on breathing in, breathing out, you're giving your monkey brain, that monkey brain part of your head, something to do. Focus on breathe in, breathe out, in. And then while you're doing that, you have the deeper functions of your brain that are going on in the background. And that's when your mind starts to like wander, starts to think about problems, starts to come up with solutions, starts to reflect on things that have happened, because you don't have that part of your brain that's constantly switching to a different thought, a different train of thought. I need to do this, or I need to do that, or I need to do this. Like, no, right now, that part of my brain is just focusing on breathing in, breathing out, in, breathing out. And the rest of your brain then can uh, focus on these other things. And I think that's a really good way to build and to work on your self-awareness, and just to build, being mindful. Is if you're kind of thinking about a situation that happened to you while you're meditating, that's going to give you maybe a different perspective. Maybe you're going to think, hey, like I did this. Maybe I should have done that. I was upset that day. Why was I upset that day? Well, I guess, this happened, and you might be able to come up with some answers or draw some conclusions through that. So I think that meditation is even just like 5 minutes. Like, meditation, not even 5 minutes. Meditation doesn't have to be long. You don't have to sit there and just do that for 30 minutes. You can meditate anytime, and you don't have to sit still while you're meditating. You could, be taking a walk, and you can be thinking about your breathing, and you can still have that other part of your brain, going. Or even if you're taking a walk and you're thinking about like putting one foot in front of another, you're just thinking about walking, and you let your mind wander. It's kind of like that. Have you ever, you go for a walk somewhere and you look down and you're thinking, and then you look up and you're like, oh, how'd I get here? Because that part of your brain that's constantly aware of all the stimulus is being distracted by something else, so that the other part of your brain can think. So you can meditate for 30 seconds. You can meditate for 30 seconds while you're on the bus, on the train, going to work. Don't meditate in your car though. Think about driving. Focus on the road.
Trying to I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember what it's called. Uh, this is actually like a thing. I can't find it. Um, but the concept of like even even in like science
Mm-hmm.
and inventing and all of that, they have the concept of like when you're stuck,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can't progress with a problem. Like you go and work on something totally different
Yep.
because it creates this space where your cognitive function, right, that conscious is working through something completely different, and it allows that subconscious to kind of start working its way through, and
Mhm.
that's when you have that, oh yeah, yeah, this'll, and you jump back over to the problem you were working on to begin with.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. 100%. Sometimes you just need to
Yeah.
distract that part of your brain to
And
have the rest of your brain like
yeah,
pick it up, or have it time to like think without you focusing on thinking. So I feel like if you focus on thinking, it doesn't work. Like you can't make yourself think. Like
yeah.
I need to think about, like you're gonna go crazy. So you do something
Well,
else and let
also
it go on in the
you
background.
start to add in these other factors into
Mhm.
the equation that you don't need to because you're trying so hard to fix it, right?
Mhm.
Like a lot of times, uh, talking on what we're talking about now, not on the science side, but like on the emotional side, a lot of times, like our issues and our problems are really simple solutions,
And
right?
there's yeah.
But we add so much extra to the equation that before we know it, it's this complicated, uh, this complicated thing.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's, hey, like Mal said something to me, and because of the tone of voice he said it in,
Mhm.
like it hit different than how it should have.
Yeah.
And that wasn't Mal's fault. That's, I'm interpreting it that way because that's not at all what he intended. Like that's
Mhm.
a really simple thing to come to.
Yeah.
Issue is we start throwing in these other things, like especially, if you're a person with insecurities, which we all have them, we start throwing in these other things of like, well, Mal also did this last week, and maybe because of that, like that instructed this, and we add all these different things that never happened.
Mhm. And like you're saying now, just taking uh, a problem and or taking something that happened to you and like hyper focusing so much on it to the point where what you're not even focusing on the right part anymore. And so that's kind of like what we're talking about with self-awareness, in that you focus so much on how you're feeling right now in this instance that you're not focused on why you're feeling this way, or what you're really feeling, because you're caught up in the emotion that you're in right now. And so there's something that's in programming. I don't know if you've heard it. It's called rubber duck debugging. Um, and that's where if you're stuck on a problem and you can't figure it out and you're obsessing over it and it's not working, that literally like you have a rubber ducky, or maybe someone uses something else, but the whole idea started, I guess, with a rubber ducky, where you sit down and you explain. In this, you would explain your code or whatever you're working on, but you explain it to the rubber duck,
Yeah.
talk it through, and you explain it. And then as you're doing that, and as you're you're not just focusing on like, why won't this work, what's going on, and you start talking through things to it, then you'll have that realization of like, oh, like this is what's wrong. So in the same way, I'm not saying you have to talk to a rubber duck, but if you sit there and you're thinking about what's going on in your brain, or even just talking to yourself out loud about like, why are you angry, what happened, what's the situation, like just explaining the situation to yourself right now might cause you to have that realization of, well, okay, I'm mad. Like, let's say I come home from work or something and I have a fight with my girlfriend. I've never fought with my girlfriend ever, but I mean, not like anything serious. But let's say we had a fight and I got really upset, and so like right now I'm just in this moment of like, I'm angry at this person. If I take the time and I'm like, all right, I'm angry at this person. Like, why am I angry at this person? Well, because they said this. But like, okay, they probably didn't mean it like that. Like, why I didn't take that way in the past? Why am I taking it that way now? Well, I had a bad day at work, or there was a lot of traffic on my way home, and people were driving like idiots because I had to go through all this construction, and and then you start to break it down and you realize that what you think you're angry about isn't necessarily always what you are angry about. And having the self-awareness to find that is really important. Um, and then at the same time, tying into kind of what you're saying with like, if I said something to you,
Mm-hmm.
not instantly um, becoming offended or defensive, or anyone says something to you, kind of tying it into another pillar that we're going to talk about next week or the week after, is having the empathy to know, like, all right, they said this, why? Like, I took it like this, but like, why did they say it like that? Like, what are they feeling that's causing them to react in that way? And then, okay, like, maybe I don't need to take it personally because they're reacting in this way because of this, and I understand that. And so it's not coming from a place of hatred towards me. It's coming from a place of, they're angry at something else, and I don't need to be angry at them because they're not really angry at me. They're angry, So being able to empathize with people in that way is also really important, um, to your own self awareness.
I think the fact that you took it to coding is a really cool thing because I wasn't thinking about this until you said it.
Mm-hmm.
But the concept of coding, and like the thinking coding and emotional, um, just well-being and intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
self-awareness are really like super connected in way deep, like metaphorical ways.
Yeah.
So like we've been talking about the concept of um, most of the time when you're angry,
Mm.
the stimulus that makes you angry isn't actually what you're angry at, right?
Yeah.
So like I'm angry because you said something, and that puts me in this uproar. But in reality, what I'm angry at is, I'm stuck at home in quarantine. I haven't been able to go to work and hang out with, all these other factors
Mm-hmm.
adding up, and you were just the last little thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, so how many times as gamers, especially Destiny players, have we had this like major bug and we're like, "Oh my gosh, uh this gun that, is only supposed to do like 60 damage is all of a sudden one-shotting Guardians in the Crucible every shot. Every shot just one shots Guardians, and Bungie's like, "We're looking into it. We don't understand why." And then come out and it's like, "Well, you see, like we added this emote to the game,
Mm-hmm.
and for some reason, like there was an extra comma in the coding for this emote that makes you, pet a chicken. And because of that extra comma, this gun that's been in the game for 4 years all of a sudden did 18 billion damage.
Yeah.
Those two things aren't related at all. How did that affect it? But it does because the entire coding of the game is related.
Yep.
Like that's the concept of like this emotional roller coaster thing of like self-awareness, especially, is being aware, being able to step back and be like, okay, everything's connected, and like, it's Chinese water torture. I'm not I'm not dying and, in this horrible state of mind on the first drop. It's the billionth drop
Yeah.
that I finally snap.
Yeah.
Same thing with emotional and, self-awareness. Like typically I'm not angry the first time something happens. It's the every time, you know, adding up that I'm not talking about, or, working through all of those other times.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Yeah. 100%. Um.
Because I
Yeah.
can promise you, chat, if you're dealing with something, if every time little things come up, if you you know recognize those things and address them, you blow up a lot less. Like the cracks where you're like angry and, ready to, they just don't happen as and if they do, they're not nearly as often
Yeah.
because like you've not, there's not 800 pounds of emotion on your back. There's this one thing.
Exactly. And I think also having the awareness to then say, this, this thing, this situation or whatever set me off last time. And if you know something sets you off and you know something is going to upset you, having the awareness to then do your best to avoid that similar situation. Obviously, if it's not something you can avoid, this doesn't apply. But if it's something that's a situation that's avoidable, you need to have the self awareness. Maybe it's like having the awareness and having the self awareness and the emotional awareness that like every time you hang out with this one person, all you do is argue and things are very toxic, and maybe it's maybe you need to cut that person out of your life. I mean, don't hang out with toxic people. Don't, just because someone was your friend at one point doesn't mean they have to be your friend forever. Just because someone's your family doesn't mean you have to like them. I mean, your family, you don't get to choose your family, but if your family's toxic, I'm not saying, ditch your family, but like if your family is if you're in a toxic environment and your family is holding you back or you feel like they are, you know, don't let that stop you. And having the awareness, having the emotional awareness and the self-awareness to understand that, you gotta do what's going to be the best for you is important. And it's important that you understand the people that you're choosing to associate with and the people that are in your life. I mean, I have friends that don't talk to their mom or to their dad anymore because it was a very toxic relationship and it was not a healthy relationship and it was painful, but in the long term it was easier and it was better for them to cut ties. And that sucks and that's really sad, but at the end of the day, again, you need to have the awareness to understand that you need to do what you need to do to get out of that situation that you might be in.
I'm gonna grab something off of my bookshelf real quick because I think this is something important for self awareness. So I
Okay.
will be right back.
All right. Well, I is going to grab something off of his bookshelf.
All right.
Oh, he's back.
What happened?
What? I just said you were going to grab something off your bookshelf, and then I said, "Oh, you're back."
Yeah. So one of the biggest tools,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we've talked about how to do stuff, but one of the biggest tools that I think we can do is understanding ourselves. Uh, and one of the best ways we can do that is by understanding personality types and how they interact with each other.
Yep.
So, cue Myers-Briggs plug right here. Uh, if you don't know what Myers-Briggs testing is, uh, it is a personality test, uh, and it's literally um, breaks down. I think it's 16 types of personalities, all off of 4 categories that are split into 2 types of people for each category. So, for instance, I am an ENFP. I am full heartedly an ENFP. You will, if you take the test, you will get percentages and stuff. Uh, but that means extroverted, intuitive, feeling, perceiving, right? And that is my personality type. So the way they break that down is how you uh, gain energy, how you refill yourself,
Mm-hmm.
is your extroversion, introversion. How you take in knowledge, you take in information, intuitive or sensing. How you make decisions is your feeling, thinking, and then perceiving, judging is It's been a long time since I've gone over this.
Very good.
But anyway, uh, first knowing your personality type because um, and that's going to be a huge thing, knowing your personality type, how you interact with people,
Yeah.
and understanding other people's personality types. I can't expect. Uh, I believe Mal's an extrovert, so this doesn't make sense for him actually. But if Mal was a introvert, like I couldn't expect him to gain energy the same way I do,
Mhm.
right? Which means certain things that I want to do that I think Mal should be doing as well, I can't expect him to do.
Yeah.
Um, if I know that Mal is uh, thinking versus feeling, which I also believe Mal's probably feeling based on knowing Mal. This
Probably.
is
I
when
haven't
you've
taken
done
this test in
when
forever.
you've done this a lot with people, you start to pick up on things. Uh, so, for instance, guys, if somebody uses the phrase "I feel" in conversation, a lot of times that's a dead indicator of that they are a feeling person, not a thinking person. And if they use the phrase "I think," a lot of times that's an indicator that uh, they're thinking, not feeling. Uh, but
They're telling you right there. You just gotta be perceptive enough to pick it
and
up.
it's not an always thing, but it
No.
is a good indicator. But if Mal's thinking and I'm feeling, I might go to Mal with decisions that I'm making because I know that a lot of my decisions are amplified by emotion.
Mhm.
So, and I know Mal's going to go bring logic into it. So Myers Briggs, great tool. Personality, understanding personalities is huge.
Pretty sure you can
Right?
take the test online too. It's like what, like a 45-minute test or something like that.
It's not even timed, but it is like 100 and something question,
Well, that's what I
110
mean.
and
It
some
takes like
questions.
45 minutes to get through it because it's a
It
lot of
depends.
questions.
If you're doing it right, it shouldn't take you very long.
Yeah, because you should
Because
just answer off of
because you should
instinct. And
just boom. You should answer within the first like 3 seconds of seeing the question
yeah,
and comprehending. The other thing, you ever seen this book, Mal?
strengths-based leadership. I have seen it. I have not read it.
I don't know if you can see it, but at the very top,
Mhm.
Strength Finders 2.0. Uh, so you don't have to read the book. I actually wouldn't encourage you to read the book.
Mhm.
I would encourage you to take the test or any Strength Finders test because what the test does is it actually tells you what your top 5 strengths are, and it's very similar to Myers-Briggs testing. It is a long test that tells you kind of what your top 5 like strengths are
Mhm.
in leadership. Let me see if I can find the yeah. So for me, if I can find my page that had it all written out, like my top 5 are communication, woo, empathy, competition, and something else on the fifth. But yeah, so the idea of understanding those things. Now I know my top strength is competition. Right? One of my top strengths is competition, right?
Mhm.
But the way they go through it and help you talk about stuff is understanding the weaknesses in your strengths and
Yeah,
understanding the pitfalls. And like every strength has pitfalls, right? We're going to
100%.
talk
Yeah.
about we're going to talk about empathy in a couple weeks, right?
Mhm.
Empathy can be a great strength. It's one of my top. It's like my top strength actually. Um, but the pitfall of empathy is you can literally get too attached.
Yeah.
You can grow in. If Mal is going through a deep depression, me as an empathetic person, I can get so attached to Mal's emotions that Mal can actually come out of the depression that he's in, and I'm still in a depression because of how attached to his emotions I was.
Yeah.
Right. So understanding how your strengths can be weaknesses in that deep on a deep level can put you in a situation where you prevent things.
Mhm.
Right. I as an empathetic person have to look at some things and say, hey, like I would love to help you, but I have to take a step away from this
Yeah.
like sends you to get help somewhere else because I
Oh, for
can't
sure.
handle that.
Yeah. And having the self awareness to know I'm not the person to help you is also really important. Having the self awareness to say, this is a problem that I am not the best person to go to for. And like you were saying, having the self awareness to say, I need another opinion on this decision before I make this decision is very important. Having the emotion, having the self awareness to say, I'm a very emotional person. I react on emotion. I make decisions based on emotion. I need someone that's going to help me bring logic into this before I make this big decision to make sure that it's a decision that makes sense for me
Yeah,
logically, not just emotionally. Emotionally, it might be what you want to do. Um, and people act on emotion and people buy on emotion a lot too, which is why a lot of times people get in trouble because they get really excited about something and then they buy it and they're like, oh no. But that's why it's important to have, both, not necessarily, you don't have to have, a high level of both
includer.
in yourself, but to have someone that you can talk to about big decisions like a big purchase or, uh, a big change in your life or a big project that you want to undertake. If you're an emotional person, it's important to have that logical person. And also, I think if you're a logical person, it's important to have someone that is emotional as well. Because if you're just very logical about it, then you might be less likely to take a risk that might pan out big for you.
So I lied. I just pulled up my test results. My top is empathy and positivity, and then it's communication, woo, and includer,
Ah,
which is so
I can
not
see that.
competition. Competition is a lower one.
I can see that.
It's like six. Uh, but the other thing that it populates is um, kind of where your strengths lie from a business standpoint
Hmm.
and from a leadership standpoint. So they have four kind of categories: strategic thinking, influencing, executing, and relationship building. All five of my all five of my strengths fall into two of those categories. So uh, it's probably going to be a good idea for me to surround myself with people who are good at strategic thinking and executing
Yeah.
because those are not good for me. Those are
Mhm.
not things that I'm good at. Relationship building and influencing, though, like I'm good at those.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think it's important. And I guess in a business setting, it's important to have the self awareness to know where your strengths are and where your shortcomings are because you need to have people that complement your shortcomings and you need to have strengths that complement other people's shortcomings. You need to be a
Yeah,
cohesive team. If you just have a team full of people who are just really good at relation building, you're going to have a lot of great relationships, but you're not going to execute on any of them. You're not going to know, you're not going to be able to make a plan and execute to take advantage of the relationships that you built. So
yeah,
it's important to have everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think those are two really good tools
Mhm.
that along with a lot of other like understanding meditation and how that impacts and uh, but a lot of those are like the slow down and look in, those are things that like we can do and they help, but they're not going to expose to us things that we may not see. Whereas strength finders and Myers-Briggs can sometimes expose to things to you that you're not aware of.
Mhm.
That it's a test. It may not 100% be accurate, but at the same time, it's something for you to look at and take in and go, oh, I didn't think about myself in that vein, but I could see where I fall into those things,
Yeah.
right? So they
100%.
they